Battle of Alesia, a story packed with strategy, resilience, and some serious clashes between two powerhouses. And now it's September 52 BCE. On one side, we've got the Romans, led by none other than Julius Caesar, the brilliant general whose reputation as a conqueror was spreading far and wide. On the other side, the Gauls, a united group of tribes, were determined to protect their homeland, all under the leadership of Vercingetorix, the Arverni chief. The setting? Alesia, a fortress on top of a hill in what is now eastern France. The Gauls were holed up there, and Caesar saw an opportunity to finally break them. So what does he do? In a classic move of Roman engineering genius, Caesar's army builds not one, but two massive walls of fortifications around the hill, completely trapping the Gauls inside. The idea was simple: cut off their supplies and starve them out. Vercingetorix was no pushover though. He was a tough leader, and had been giving Caesar a hard time, but this time, the Romans had the upper hand. In the end, the Gauls just couldn't break through, and despite Vercingetorix's efforts, Caesar's strategy worked. The Gauls were defeated, and that marked the end of Gallic independence. This was Caesar's crowning achievement, and it solidified his place as one of the greatest military minds in history. Now, this all ties back to Caesar's larger campaign in Gaul, which started a few years earlier. The whole thing kicked off when the Helvetii, a Gallic tribe, tried to move into Roman territory looking for greener pastures. They even asked Caesar for permission to pass through peacefully, but Caesar wasn't having any of it. He claimed it was about protecting Rome's allies, but some say he just wanted an excuse to go to war and expand his influence. And, in typical Caesar fashion, he made quick work of the Helvetii, forcing them to retreat. Things didn't stop there. Caesar spent years in Gaul, winning battles left and right, but his aggressive expansion wasn't exactly winning him many friends among the Gallic tribes. Eventually, these tribes realized that if they didn't unite, they were doomed. That's when Vercingetorix stepped up as the leader, rallying the tribes and turning the scattered resistance into a more organized force. The tensions boiled over when Vercingetorix led a brutal raid on a Roman settlement, killing everyone and stealing supplies. Caesar, of course, wasn't about to let that slide. He marched his legions back into action, reclaiming the town and continuing his relentless campaign through Gaul. Vercingetorix, knowing he couldn't match Caesar's army head-on, came up with a different plan: starve Caesar out by destroying all the food and supplies in the region. This hit the Romans hard, but Caesar, ever the tactician, managed to keep his legions going, even as they faced hunger and exhaustion. Still, Caesar's pride in his soldiers was evident. He talked about how, despite everything, his troops never wavered or complained. He saw them as embodying the unshakable spirit of Rome. But Vercingetorix wasn't done. He gathered his forces for one final stand at Alesia, and that's where it all came to a head. The battle itself was massive, tens of thousands of soldiers on both sides. The outcome would shape the future of Gaul, and Caesar knew it. And Caesar wasn't taking any chances at Alesia. Once his legions had surrounded the fortress town, they got to work on building some serious defenses. Now, Alesia itself was positioned on top of Mount Auxois, a natural stronghold surrounded by rivers, making it nearly impossible to capture without some clever strategy. Caesar, being the tactician he was, knew brute force wasn't going to work here. The first thing Caesar did? He ordered his men to dig in, literally. His legions constructed an 11-mile-long ring of fortifications around Alesia, a defensive perimeter meant to trap the Gauls inside and cut off any chance of supplies or reinforcements getting through. On top of that, he had them dig trenches, erect wooden palisades, and set up all kinds of deadly traps, like sharpened stakes and hidden pits. This wasn't just a simple blockade, it was a fortress around a fortress. And Caesar wasn't done. Worried that Gallic reinforcements might try to break through from the outside, he built a second line of fortifications facing outward. It was essentially a double layer of defense. He was preparing for a fight on two fronts, from the Gauls trapped inside and any who might come to their rescue. Meanwhile, Vercingetorix wasn't just sitting around waiting. He sent out cavalry to try and slow down the Romans while he fortified his own position, but he was running out of options. His supplies were dangerously low, just enough to last 30 days. So, in a desperate move, he expelled everyone who wasn't needed to fight, mostly women and children, leaving them stranded between the two armies, begging for mercy. But Caesar refused to let them through, and they were left to starve. It was a harsh decision, but Caesar's focus was on victory, not compassion. Then, just when things were looking bleak for the Gauls, their long-awaited reinforcements arrived. According to Caesar's own account, it was a massive force, around 250,000 infantry and 8,000 cavalry. The Roman legions were suddenly fighting on two fronts, with Vercingetorix attacking from inside Alesia and the new Gallic forces pushing from outside. The battle was on. The fighting was fierce. For hours, the battle swung back and forth, with neither side gaining a clear advantage. The Gauls threw everything they had at the Roman defenses: arrows, javelins, sling stones, while Caesar's legions held their ground, responding with javelins and siege engines. Even Mark Antony, one of Caesar's top commanders, had to step in and help stabilize the Roman lines during one of the Gallic assaults. But the big moment came when Vercingetorix ordered a full-scale attack, hoping to break through the Roman defenses once and for all. The fighting was brutal, and for a while it looked like the Romans might be overwhelmed. Caesar, though, wasn't about to give up. He personally went to the front lines to rally his men, reminding them that everything they had fought for was on the line in this moment. Then came the Roman counterattack. Caesar called in his reserves, led by Decimus Brutus and Gaius Fabius, who managed to push the Gauls back. At the same time, the Roman cavalry launched a surprise attack on the Gallic rear, breaking their morale. One by one, the Gallic forces began to crumble, retreating in chaos. The battle was over. Alesia had fallen, but at a staggering cost. The battlefield was littered with the bodies of fallen warriors, and the siege had been devastating for both sides. The next day, Vercingetorix, realizing the fight was lost, surrendered to Caesar. Dressed in his finest armor, he presented himself to the Roman general and was taken prisoner, later paraded through Rome before being executed. This victory wasn't just another notch in Caesar's belt, it was the final blow that ended Gallic resistance. Alesia marked the end of Gallic independence and secured Roman dominance in the region for generations to come. Though Caesar's conquests in Gaul had cost countless lives, both Gallic and Roman, his name would forever be associated with one of the most astonishing victories in military history.